Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dursey Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of APA and Chair of the New Urbanism Division, and I am your webcast moderator. Today is Friday, July 27th. We will be hearing the presentation, Women in Planning, Emerging Leaders from Academia to Planning Practice. For technical help during today's webcast, you can type your questions in the chat box found in the webcast toolbar to the right of your screen, or you can call that 1-800 number. For your content questions related to the presentation, you can type those in the questions box, again, located in your webinar toolbar to the right of your screen, and we'll answer those during the Q&A at the end of the presentation. And if you would please, if you know who you'd like to answer the question, please specify when you're typing that question in. So coming up on your screen is a list of the sponsoring chapters and divisions for 2018. Thanks to all the participating sponsors for making these webcasts possible and free to their members. If you're scrolling down the list and you don't see your chapter division listed, we just ask that you reach out to them and suggest that they join us. Today's webcast in particular is sponsored by the Women in Planning Division, and you can learn more about them by visiting planning.org/divisions. And you can learn about all of our chapters by visiting planning.org/chapters. And here's my screen. Okay, so coming up on your screen is a list of our upcoming webcasts. We do have more, they're still pending, so make sure that you definitely check back on our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. And you can log your CM credits for attending today's webcast by visiting planning.org and just head over in your My APA account and select activities by provider, and or you can just search for CM activities and just type in the event number or the title of today's webcast, both of which can be found on our webcast webpage. And this webcast has been approved for 1.5 CM credits for live viewing only. We do have some recorded webcasts that are available for distance education, and for availability of these, just check our webcast webpage, again, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. And to receive up-to-date information on our sessions, head over to Facebook and like us, Planning Webcast Series. And we are recording today's session. It will be available on our YouTube channel. Just head over to YouTube, search Planning Webcast. We'll also have a PDF of the presentation available at the conclusion of the session, again, on our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. Okay, enough with me. We are going to now turn it over to Corinne, who will get us started. Corinne, it is headed over to you. Perfect.
All right. Welcome to our webinar hosted, as Christine mentioned, by the Women in Planning Division. And so we are really excited today to present a panel of recent graduate and early career planners who will be discussing their research and project work that they've done in various planning programs across the country, which is really exciting. And it focuses on equity and infrastructure, mobility constraints, environmental issues, transportation barriers, and they're also going to kind of share their own experiences and stories. So what they studied, what kind of research they've done, and then where they are now in their planning careers. And so this is something that we focus on with the Women in Planning Division to encourage and support and really empower one another within our field in order to support the work that we're doing. And so we're really excited to have these really great women on the panel today discussing this. And I'm going to actually introduce all of them as well. And so first we're going to have Andrea Clark. So Andrea is a recent grad of the University of Kansas with a master's in city planning. So she's an urban planner and an advocate dedicated to creating equitable and sustainable communities. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Organizational Psychology and a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from SUNY New Paltz. And then she also found her way to urban planning through social and cultural studies which continue to shape her understanding of cities and communities. So she's a member of the Heartland Conservation Alliance, Steering Council and Policy Group. And then she also loves green infrastructure and of course story mapping, and she lives in Kansas City, Missouri. Next, we'll have Genevieve Pair 3. So she's a recent grad of Arizona State University with a master's in urban and environmental planning and a master's in science and sustainability. So she is focused on how community-driven plans and sufficient workforce housing and good urban design can foster a more sustainable and healthier built environment. And so she's done several research projects, including the capstone that she'll present today, which did win the 2018 AICP Student Project Award for Applied Research, which is excellent. And then she's also done some other significant research projects. She has 10 years of professional experience in state and city government, and then she'll begin her full-time position as an associate planner for the city of Flagstaff in Arizona. Oh, she just started this past June. Then we'll have Carrie Sawyer. So Carrie Sawyer is a recent grad of the University of Pennsylvania School of Design with ambitions to rethink design and use of streets. And so she really focuses her work on the intersection of data and design. And then her research uses eye tracking glasses to collect authentic visual experience and provide a comprehensive approach to understanding mobility, wayfinding, safety. And so she also works towards a better and safer street. She's an associate planner within the Office of Transit, Bicycle, and Pedestrian Planning at the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, and also a volunteer for Community Design Collaborative. And then next we have Yamasarit Tadal. So she's a recent graduate of Florida Atlantic University with a bachelor in urban design and architecture, and then also holds an associate degree of architecture from Montgomery College. And so she was born and raised in Ethiopia, and she joined the Florida Atlantic University Facilities Management Office, working as a volunteer for various government and private development corporations. And so her projects really touch on transit-oriented development, public transportation, infrastructure, redevelopment. And so she has many interests in these areas. And her undergraduate thesis project was focused on design solutions for TOD, which you'll see today. And then after grad school, she plans to go back to Ethiopia to work with urban poor on issues of housing and urban development issues. So after the 4 presentations, we'll then hear from Raya Ismaili. So Raya is a senior planner here at the Metropolitan Council. That's kind of where we are today, just FYI. We also have, just a sidebar, we have Brianne Rothstein, who's our vice chair of Women in Planning Division, also here. But Raya, she's a senior planner here with the local planning assistance of the Met Council, where she manages a plat monitoring program and redevelopment monitoring program, participates in reviewing local comprehensive plan amendments and environmental reviews, and acts as a reviews coordinator in managing council reviews. So prior to joining the council in 2013, she's worked at the Minneapolis Riverfront Partnership as a program associate intern for the West Broadway Business and Area Coalition, and at the Sierra Club North Star chapter. And so I want to welcome all of our panelists today. I'm the last one there, Corinne, so I'm Director of Programs for the Women in Planning Division, and I work here at the Met Council as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get started with our first panelist. So Andrea is going to be our first presenter.
And while Andrea is loading up, do we want to go ahead and do that poll?
Yes, that would be great. Yeah, can we do, yes, we're going to do a poll so we can know who's on the line with us. That would be great.
Okay, let me go ahead and launch that. We just want to know, let me get this sucker going here. How many years of planning experience you've got? So if you could just go ahead and answer the quick poll, and we'll close her down here in a moment. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close it now, and then I'll show everyone the results. Okay, so it looks like 20% 0 to 5 years, 77% 5+ years, and 3% of our viewers are students. So that's kind of the breakdown of who we have on the line today. So I'm going to go ahead and send it back to Andrea. Your screen is now up.
All right. Hi, I'm Andrea from Kansas City. I do not have a degree in industrial design, but I think it's really cool. Like Corinne said, I kind of came to urban planning through social and cultural studies. My most recent degrees, it was a joint master's program at the University of Kansas with urban planning and American studies. In my joint thesis that I wrote for those degrees, I made a case for urban planning to use visual ethnography, which Carrie will kind of get into later, to help urban planners understand how people experience, perceive, and make space meaningful in their everyday lives. But today I'm going to share a final project for my environmental planning class, which is a neighborhood stormwater management guide. Let's see. All right. In 2010, the city of Kansas City, Missouri, settled with the EPA over Clean Water Act violations. And since 2010, for the next 25 years, the city will spend at least $2.5 billion. I've seen other estimates around $5 billion to eliminate unauthorized overflows of untreated raw sewage and to reduce population levels in urban stormwaters. Since then, Kansas City is also received a grant from EPA Urban Waters, so Kansas City is one of their urban waters sites. And since 2010, water and sewer rates have more than doubled, which has been a pretty big concern for a lot of residents in the area. So at the time that I was taking my environmental planning class and needed to make a final project for it, these are the things that were on my mind. Stormwater management, green infrastructure, the high water rates. And one day I was sitting at my favorite coffee shop while it was raining, thinking about these issues, and I kind of sketched out a neighborhood guide. What were the things that I was learning that I could pass on to my friends, to my neighbors, so that we could all kind of do what we could to help with these issues. At the time, I lived in South Hyde Park. Right now, I live in Old Hyde Park, which is less than a mile away. But at the time, I was in South Hyde Park, which is a historic urban neighborhood in Midtown Kansas City. It's a pretty diverse neighborhood, especially in terms of socioeconomic status. You have people living in poverty. You have middle upper class residents as well. The neighborhood is in the process of gentrifying, so you have all of those interesting developments and tensions coming out. The primary land use is medium density residential. As you can see in the images, there's a mix of housing, single family housing, as well as duplexes and apartments. There's also some commercial and light industrial land uses, like you can see here with the car lot along the eastern edge of the neighborhood. So there's a lot of like auto shops and car shops or car washes. Some of them are vacant, but some of them are occupied. And then on the western edge of the neighborhood, in this picture here, I was walking my dog in Gillum Park. It's a large park that has ball fields, playgrounds, a spray park, running trails. But the neighborhood is really hilly, which is one interesting thing that impacts stormwater runoff in the neighborhood. So due to the high slope percentages and the impervious surfaces in the neighborhood, pollution and debris are swept away by stormwater runoff towards Brush Creek. And you can see here that Brush Creek feeds into Blue River, which then feeds into the Missouri River. So I wanted to make a resource that was educational and practical. I wanted it to be something that both renters, homeowners, property owners could look at and feel empowered to make simple changes rather than be overwhelmed by the scale of the issue or overwhelmed and inundated with information that's hard to understand. So I ended up creating a neighborhood guide using Story Map. And I'm actually going to go over to the website here. So this is the story map that I created after some introductory content. There are some interactive maps here. So you can actually click on it. This is my old neighborhood, and this is my new neighborhood up here. So you can find your neighborhood. It then locates the neighborhood into the watershed. And I wanted to do this so that people could see how local actions of what they put in their lawn, you know, what they throw on the ground, all of these things impact an area much larger than your driveway or the sidewalk, or, you know, the sewer at the end of the street. And then ultimately shows that everything that gets into the Missouri River ultimately flows down to the Gulf of Mexico. So trying to get some kind of visual understanding for, you know, how our local actions have a much broader impact. I then go into common pollutants that I know are an issue in our neighborhood, such as organic material, plant nutrients or fertilizer, sediment pollution. It's a hot topic in my neighborhood. Bacterial contamination. I absolutely had to include it because one of the reoccurring topics of discussion in our neighborhood Facebook page is pet owners who do not pick up after their dogs. So I definitely had to include it on here. Petrochemicals, like I said, there are a lot of auto shops and car shops in the neighborhood. Thermal pollution, this is a giant parking lot leading into the neighborhood. You've got ball fields over here and a playground over here. And for each, I'll go back up to the popular topic. For each one, I give a brief explanation of what the pollution is, and then the impact that it has on water quality, on aquatic life, and then a couple practical tips that people can use to either change behavior, improvements they can make to their homes or properties. Some of them are larger projects that the neighborhood association can apply for funding to implement, especially around the park, or just things to advocate for on a city scale. I then go into green infrastructure, talk about what it is, simple things to do, like rain barrels, then also getting into, again, larger scale projects like rain gardens and curb cuts and bioswales and things like that, permeable pavement. And then lastly, I include a handful of local resources. So all of these places either do soil testing or they sell native, you know, perennials. You can get compost, you can take yard waste to be recycled, and a lot of them provide free education to the community as well. And so that is the resource. If you have any questions about it, the neighborhood guide, or you're curious about any of the other projects that I worked on, or any of my master's theses, they're available on my website and you can contact me through the website as well. And I'll answer any questions you have at the end of the webinar. Now I will be handing it over to Genevieve.
Genevieve, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
It won't let me unmute. Can you hear me?
Oh, there we go. You are good. We can hear you now.
Okay, it just showed that I was still muted. So
Oh, interesting. Okay.
good. I'm glad you can hear me. Okay.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you everybody for joining. My name is Genevieve Pear3. I am an associate planner with the city of Flagstaff, Arizona. So I just started that about 6 weeks ago. So still in the new job. But before I get started talking about my project, just a little bit of background about myself. I got a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Justice and Environmental Science in 2008. I was always really interested in urban, social, and environmental sustainability issues, but I didn't really know that much about planning at that time. Then the recession hit, so I took a 7-year gap actually between undergrad and grad school, where I taught, I did GIS, I did project management for state government, but then I kind of found my way back to this original interest in urban in planning, and I knew now that planning was really what I wanted to do in terms of thinking about how do we organize our urban areas and to make them more livable and more equitable as well. So I ended up pursuing a concurrent master's degrees at Arizona State University. So I did a Master of Urban Environmental Planning, and then I also did a Master of Science in Sustainability. So in this presentation, I'll be talking about my urban environmental planning degree, which focused on housing in the small mountain resort community of Ketchum, Idaho. For my sustainability one, I took a different track looking at river projects. We both learned a lot about planning and sustainability. And while I was in school, I was a member of the ASU Student Planning Association. I was also pretty involved with APA on the Student Representatives Council, and I was in the executive board. So really awesome opportunities to meet other planners and just learn from other people as well. Let's see, let's get my slide to advance. Okay, there we go. So my project and my Master of Urban Environmental Planning project was the high cost of unaffordable housing in Ketchum, Idaho, causes, effects, and potential solutions. So Ketchum is a small mountain resort community located in central Idaho. It's about 2,500 people, and they have serious housing affordability problems. So the median single-family home price is actually over $1 million. So really, really expensive. They also have a very low amount of long-term rentals, so regular like month and long-term lease rentals. They're also very expensive, and they have a very high percentage of vacation homes and short-term rentals. So Ketchum, the city really wants to address this because having enough housing to meet their residents' needs and have it be affordable is an important component of their comprehensive plan. So I got involved in this project, even though I'm in Arizona. My advisor had been to Ketchum and heard about this internship, and I was really interested in kind of seeing how housing fit into broader social sustainability issues. So I applied and ended up working for the city for about a year. And my goal was to identify and analyze the causes of and potential solutions to housing unaffordability. So I had 6 main focus areas. I looked at long and short-term demographic and housing trends, so looking at census data over time, really since 1970. I also looked at the strengths and weaknesses of the city's current policies to address housing, also looking at short-term rentals and vacation homes, because the city had a theory that those might be impacting housing affordability. I also looked at relevant Idaho state statutes and court cases, case studies of other mountain resort communities, mostly in the Mountain West area, and then kind of what policies could be available to address some of Ketchum's issues, and then from those, what recommendations would have the most impact in terms of increasing their workforce housing. So the city was interested, particularly I mentioned vacation homes and short-term rentals, because there's some research that shows that they might raise housing costs in other cities by taking away housing for permanent residents, for tourists, taking affordable homes off the market, increasing competition and driving up prices. And then people can charge a lot higher rates for short-term rentals than long-term, so there's a lot of incentives to to not rent long-term anymore and switch to short-term. So they really wanted to know kind of how all this fit together and what they could do about it. So one of the first things I established was just the baseline. How has the city changed over time? And so looking at housing prices, home values, median family income, and median gross rent from 1970 to 2015. And this is adjusted for inflation as well. You can see that there's a huge change over time, that home values increased a lot more than median family income and median gross rent. And then the surrounding county, which is Blaine County, the section in green, it also increased a lot. And that's really interesting compared to the rest of Idaho, where the increases were just a lot less. I mean, home values did increase more quickly than income, but the difference is just not as big. So we can really see that Ketchum and the surrounding county have become more expensive over time, and that kind of provided some data to support anecdotal evidence of people who had lived there for a long time. That's what they've been saying. And also over time, this graph really shows changes in the housing supply and how it's been used over time. So in 1970, about 70% of all the houses were occupied by renters or owners. Maybe about 30% or so were vacation homes, which is still a lot, but not as much as in 2015, when over 50% of all the homes were vacation homes, and the percentage of renters and owners really dropped. So only 41% of all the houses were occupied by owners and renters in 2015. So we can just see that the housing supply has also changed quite a bit since 1970, and it's kind of it's similar to the other trends in affordability that I mentioned in my previous slide. So this is looking at more recently. So I mentioned one of the things I looked at was short-term rentals. So the other one, the last slide talked more about vacation homes and short-term rentals. So in the near term, they really increased a lot in the past, maybe since 2010 or 8 years or so. So I looked at one of the short-term rental hosting sites, so VRBO, vacation rental by owner.com. And we can see that the number of hosts in Ketchum increased a lot since 2012. So there were 218 new hosts on VRBO since 2012. At the same time, the number of long-term rental listings in the newspaper dropped by 212. So that's not, it's not like every host equals one long-term rental, but basically it shows that short-term rentals are going up and long-term rentals are going down. And in Ketchum, the best place to find a long-term rental is in the newspaper. So this is kind of a great data source to just see how are these things changing over time. So I mentioned too that there's a lot of economic incentives to rent short-term. So this is just really a snapshot in time, but it shows that short-term rental hosts can charge a lot more than long-term rental hosts. So really there's a lot of incentives for them to rent short-term. It also gives them more flexible use. So the owners, if they have a vacation home, they can rent it out short-term sometimes and use it, and they can use it as a vacation home other times and check on their property whenever they want. So, and it's pretty complicated issue, but yeah, there's a lot of incentives for people to rent short-term versus long-term. So I also found, just looking at how these are distributed geographically in Ketchum, so the pink dots show where permanent homeowners live, and Ketchum has this thing called, or Idaho has this thing called homeowner exemption, which is kind of a proxy for permanent homeownership. So you can really see where permanent homeowners live compared to where short-term rentals are, which are the blue dots. So you can really see that they're located a lot in the same neighborhood. So that raises concerns about nuisance issues or conflicts between short-term rental guests and their neighbors, as well as the landlords and other neighbors as well. It also raises concerns about loss of neighborhood character. So if a neighborhood is mostly short-term rentals, what happens to the few homeowners that still live there, a few renters that still live there? So basically this shows that some of the issues that the city had thought were going on were in fact going on. So that's kind of the biggest contribution of this study is really providing the data to support what they had thought was happening anecdotally. So then, one component of my research, and I looked at a bunch of different mountain resort communities and seeing what they were doing. And this is just a handful of about a dozen or so communities that I looked at. But some models like Breckenridge is really a leader in terms of promoting workforce housing. They have really strong housing plan and political will to increase the workforce housing supply. They also have this really cool program to make long-term rentals more profitable. So this incentive to encourage short-term renter landlords to switch to long-term. So they have a tenant match program, and they provide property management services. They also have a lot of different deed-restricted properties that are at different price points and kind of diversity of housing type to meet the residents' needs throughout their life cycle. And then Durango, they have very strict short-term rental policies. They have quotas by the block in the neighborhood, and they put these in place before there were that many short-term rentals. So they actually are probably one of the most restrictive, but at the same time, they have a really high occupancy rate, like much higher than other mountain towns. And this research doesn't prove that that's necessarily the reason why, but I'm sure there's a correlation. And then Garden City, Utah, they are kind of have a model short-term rental ordinance. They're very specific and clear in terms of their process and requirements, and their leaders in terms of what to look for health and safety. So basically, the point of all of this is that, you know, different towns do different things to address their housing issues, but that the policies should match the city goals, and all these three communities did that very well. So just some things to consider. I mean, this is really a first step in a much longer process kind of for Ketchum to figure out, you know, what's going on and what they want to do about it. But some considerations just to think about that they need to think about are that vacation homes and short-term rentals are really important to tourism. So you can't ban them. The state law limits it, and you wouldn't want to either because they're really important for their economy and for bringing tourists. And they also help, you know, for permanent owners who do rent their property short-term, they can earn some extra income. But as I mentioned, Idaho laws, there's a lot that kind of limit some affordable housing incentives that could be used, that they use in other states, but they can't really use in Idaho. And then they limit, they don't really allow land use regulations to regulate short-term rentals. So there's some things that they'll have to just work around. But either way, there are things that Ketchum can do to increase the workforce housing supply. So I mentioned Breckenridge is a model, and some of those policies might work if they're adapted to Ketchum in terms of increasing the housing stock, addressing the needs of seasonal workers, incentivizing long-term rentals, coordinating regionally. So it's not just a city problem, it's a regional problem. A lot of people commute from outside the city and work there, so it really needs to be tackled on a regional basis. And then there's zoning and regulations. You know, right now it's hard to build a small affordable home, so maybe there's stuff they can do to make it easier and cheaper to do that. And then addressing their strategic sewer, water, and infrastructure gaps that could hold back housing. And then just short-term rentals, I mentioned there's not a lot they can do to regulate them, but they can capture the value better because they have a sales tax permit. So that's something that could maybe help with their create an affordable housing fund or something through that. And then tracking the market over time. So it changes all the time depending on the season and what kind of special events are going on. And then lastly, just kind of continuing this research on housing needs. So doing another housing needs assessment and investigating incentives to encourage people to continue to do long-term or switch from short-term to long-term rentals. So how this fits into my longer-term goals. I mean, I always wanted to live and work in a mountain town. And so I think that project really prepared me really well for that. And it helped me think of the social sustainability aspect of sustainability and planning, which I think sometimes gets a little bit overlooked. And so I really feel like it prepared me well to live and work in a mountain town, which the city of Flagstaff is. As I mentioned, I've been here about 6 weeks, so it's still pretty new. But it's a mountain town with housing affordability challenges, but they're also a leader in urban design and sustainability in Arizona. So I'm really excited to be here and just kind of take what I learned from that project and maybe see how it applies to the city of Flagstaff. And I hope to forge stronger planning and sustainability connections as I go. So that's it for me, but I'm also happy to answer any questions at the end of the webinar. I'll pass it over to Carrie.
Thanks, Genevieve, and thanks again to the Ohio APA and the Women in Planning Division for coordinating this platform to share research with other people and professionals. I think this is really exciting, and I've enjoyed the first two, so hopefully this meets the same bar. So good afternoon. My name is Carrie Sauer. I am a transportation planner, and this is me on the bike in that hard-to-miss helmet during a pilot test of the research that I will talk about today. So my research that I've conducted over the past few years looks to explore new metrics for understanding, evaluating, and improving safety and comfort of urban infrastructure. Before diving into that research, though, just a quick introduction. I do live and work in Philadelphia, which I love exploring all of its narrow streets and mosaics with my beagle pictured there by Independence Hall. We are big advocates of walkability. I am the person mentioned earlier with the bachelor's in industrial design and sociology. I worked for several years in housing policy, and during those years really became increasingly interested in streets and transit, and decided to pursue this full time in 2015. So I began working for the local MPO here in Philadelphia, the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, in the Office of Transit, Bicycle, and Pedestrian Planning. And I did that for 3 years, the latter 2 of which while attending University of Pennsylvania School of Design. And this past May, I graduated with a master's in city planning with a focus in transportation and infrastructure. And so while pursuing that degree, my last year of school really focused heavily on researching safety. So when we think about safety, the metrics we often think about are typically reactive. We measure safety in terms of consequences in crashes and deaths and injuries. And in this paradigm, however, we miss out on critical factors of the actual experience of streets or areas, near misses, almost crashes, or perceived safety or stress or comfort, and so on. And so the research that I conducted aims to kind of bridge that gap in data and in planning practice through the collection of user-based data to collect an authentic visual experience and a ton of data about how people use and experience streets. We did this through the use of eye tracking glasses and technology shown here on one of our participants. And so these glasses are able to collect just an enormous amount of data. Some of the key variables are listed there at right, including gaze position or where you are looking, captured every 2 milliseconds. We have fixation duration, which is the length of time a person is fixated on a certain spot. And this can be broken down into saccades, which are quick eye movements, or fixations when your gaze is focused, for a longer period of time. You're really trying to take in information. There's other variables. I won't get into too much detail, but it's measuring your head movement and the acceleration of your head movement, which angle your head is moving in. And at the same time, we're gathering just a general video of your experience and able to overlay this data on kind of how you interacted with the urban infrastructure. And so our first application in this research project was a pilot study conducted as part of a larger transportation methodology class, where we equipped volunteers with those eye tracking glasses and asked them to either walk or to bike along one of Philadelphia's latest protected bike lanes installed pretty close to campus. And from this research, we were able to understand the true experience of cyclists and pedestrians, and to know key areas for intervention and to assess the actual infrastructure and facilities in place. And one of the key areas that our research was able to highlight was the function and the value of key signage. This is probably the most important sign that we looked at, which it's placed at the end of the protected bike lane segment. And so when you approach this intersection, the cyclists are supposed to shift from the left side of the street to the right side of the street. The lane becomes a traditional buffered bike lane, but is on the right side of the street then. And this sign, as you can see, it tells you, wait for the red light, go with the pedestrians on the crosswalks, and that's the best and most safe way to navigate this intersection. So we wanted to ask, do people see this, and how do they respond to the sign when they see it? But what we found was that people don't necessarily see the sign. And what does that mean as a piece of infrastructure? The city had followed every rule in terms of placement and its design, strictly adhering to the MUTCD. But the gaze plots at right, they illustrate where the participants' gaze went while they're approaching this intersection. And you can see that they didn't really see that sign. And that has its own implications, because if people don't see the information that helps them navigate something safely, they might not do so. And that's what we found. When they don't see the sign, they choose to move in less safe ways. As shown here on this graphic, 97% of people that either participated in our research or people that we observed while conducting traffic counts at the intersection merged across the 3 lanes of traffic rather than utilize the crosswalks and signals, the movement suggested by that sign. So going forward, we're kind of hoping to use this study approach and these classes and their data to understand these types of things, to understand how people take in information, how they navigate spaces, and how they feel while doing so. We're hoping to build upon that pilot study to explore new ways of understanding mobility and safety and comfort. In one way, this might include future bike studies replicating that Chestnut Street analysis and looking at pre and post analyses of new infrastructure so that we can help inform the city and potentially other designers of what works and what doesn't, and what's useful and what is missed. One area of interest that I have is looking at wayfinding and comfort, both on streets and in other sort of transportation areas or terminals or stations. You know, how do people navigate spaces, and how can we make them more appealing and more comfortable and also safer? So I think that's pretty much it. I hope it made sense. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me at the email address provided, or to contact me through the website. There's a lot going on. I think this is a burgeoning field of research, and I'd love to hear if anyone has ideas for future studies and such. So thank you again, and I will pass this off now.
Carrie. Thank you, Carrie. Can you hear me, guys?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie. This is Yamisha Sadal, and I'm representing Florida Atlantic University. And today I'm going to talk about the project that I did for my honors planning project class, which is Design Solutions for Transit-Oriented Development in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. So Ethiopia is located on the Horn of Africa, and I was born and grew up in Africa, Ethiopia. So I came up with this project because I know some of the problems in Ethiopia and everything. And also Ethiopia is a populous landlocked country in the continent of Africa next to Nigeria. And Africa is already a home of 3 mega cities, Cairo, Lagos, and Kinshasa, which is one of the most mega city is Nigeria, and we are the most populous country next to Nigeria, which means that Ethiopia is becoming one of the mega cities in the near future. So that question helped me like to come up with like this project. So on this project, so this project is more about like focus on the transit connectivity issues faced by the Ethiopian capital of Addis Ababa, and the increase of Addis Ababa suburban pollution is linked to the shortage of public transit services, and also there is a big traffic congestion in the capital city of Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, and also there is a growing vehicle traffic. So this project will focus on how to solve this transit connectivity, and also like help the city to become more livable and connected and unified. So before I came up with the design or like what to do, I just go over with the problems that are facing in Africa, and also I just check out like different like areas, the urbanization part, infrastructure development in Africa, and also sustainability in Africa cities. How does it look like, and also what are they doing right now, like to come up with like to solve these issues and to come up with like new design prototypes according to like transit-oriented development. So I just I just see some strategies and also how are they doing on the design part, transfer into development, implication of increasing resilience, and to create a sustainable urban growth and solving urban challenges, such as like unemployment or redevelopment or like that kind of stuff. So right now it's really difficult for the majority urban dwellers, especially for the first in Africa, and to find an affordable shelter, accessible for transportation opportunities, and also a place where they can work at the same time, live. So I came up with this project, and this project helped me like to see the big future, the big picture of Ethiopia in the near future, and helping me like on this design project. So on the planning context, what I did was, as I told you, like Ethiopia is like located in the Horn of Africa. It's a landlocked country, so it means that like all the trades, the majority development policies are hello.
Yeah, we can still hear you.
Okay, it says like it's bad network. That's why. Okay, so I'm just it's the difficult of the majority of urban dwellers, especially for the poor, it becomes really hard in Africa, especially in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. So creating an affordable shelter and accessible to transit orientation opportunities, and also like by changing the policies of the improve the standard of living of the populations and improving the housing conditions is going to help them like to create more like livable opportunity for the country. So Ethiopia, they just start a new rail system on the 2015, and it's a 34-kilometer light rail project. And most of the trades Ethiopia is a landlocked country, so most of the trades are primarily use the port of Djibouti, yet with the vast majority of its international trade goods. So this train system is, as I told you, it's a new system, and it's really new, like especially for East Africa. It's the first one in East Africa. So they are not planned like for the long future. They just like did it like for the existing like time frame. So creating like a new transit oriented like development, it will help like the capital city of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, like to become more like a place to live at the same time, like instead of people like to go to the suburbs to live to afford like a housing and come to like the capital city like on the downtown and work, and at night they will go to like the suburbs. So I want to create like some to minimize the gaps and like creating like unifying like this area, especially like there are like 4 sites that I choose for this project. So helping the gaps to minimize the gaps. So that's this project's all about minimizing the gaps and unifying the city. So as we see it on the problem tree here, so there is a big scale of like development and change in Addis Ababa recently nowadays, but unfortunately this type of large scale development have a number of like negative and social, environmental, and also like economical like impacts. So on the issues is the lack of urban planning. One of the issues is the lack of urban planning mechanisms and regulations. And also some of the areas in the city has resulted that because of this, like the big scale of development, it's resulted a poor urban design outcomes. So the urbanization of Addis Ababa is leading the city to become, especially the downtown area and the areas around the downtown, to become non-affordable. There is a lack of connectivity, and at the same time, there is a degradation of quality of life. So this TOD, the transparency development, that I'm gonna propose like for different study sites, will help enhance the living standard of the city of Addis Ababa in different directions. It can be environmentally, economically, socially, and it will create a sustainable environment. So this is going to be the 4 sites that I chose for this project. And these 4 study sites are located on the most urbanized areas in Addis Ababa, and they all are experiencing transit connectivity gaps. And also, this project is going to create a way to reduce the mismatch between working and living, or improve the traffic conditions and connectivity in this 4 sites. So site 1 is locally called Hayat Road, and this area is the newest development area of Addis Ababa's expansion. And most of right now, the residents of Hayat they normally work at the downtown, they travel to this area. It's on the suburb, so they travel to this area to live around there, because the housing affordability in the Hayat area is more relevant than the downtown area. So site 1 is chosen as one of the transit redevelopment areas, because it's a high potential to fulfill the main objective to improve the area's living conditions, and also to reduce the traffic congestion that the residents, they normally travel from the suburb, the Hayat area, in the morning to the downtown. So minimizing that traffic congestion, also it will help Addis Ababa to become more sustainable. So right now, the site is mainly for residential and small local business redevelopment, but there is a big empty land and also non-redevelopment area in Hayat area. So the proposed designs for this area is creating residential areas and also mixed-use development, urban redevelopment with compact concept, and also new urban redevelopment with business districts, because at the same time it can become a working and living environment instead of traveling all the way down to downtown. So also the proposed design, it will maintain the culture and the environment aspects of the area, which is the suburb feel, and they will maintain the suburb feel. So this was the design that I proposed for this area. So still they have the new rail system, which will cross the area, and then they'll have the mixed-use buildings and residential high residential area, commercial areas, and also business districts at the same time. So the site 2 that I chose is Mescal Square, which is the city's busiest areas in the city. It's the busiest intersection. As you see it on the picture, there is no light, there is no roundabout, and also there is no traffic claiming options, and there is a high risk of getting into accidents in this area. So in this area, I propose a smooth transition between this area. So the new proposed pedestrian and also roundabout, it will help the traffic congestion to get smaller, and also it will create a different route for turning vehicles, and by reducing driver confusion associated with the perpendicular conjunction. So for this area is mainly into like creating a normal flow of traffic, which is not possible at the existing flow of traffic. So site 3 is the cultural district in Ethiopia. So on the site 3 is mainly creating, there is the train system in these 4 areas. The new train system will pass in these 4 areas. So I want this train system can be accessible for different types of categories of different types of areas in Addis Ababa. So site 3 is going to be a cultural district. So on this cultural district, there is no sidewalk, and also it's not unified and everything. So creating that cultural district and helping showing that this is a cultural district, and then by putting like sculptures and creating a bigger sidewalk, and people can enjoy at the same time, and then not worrying about like the traffic conjunctions and everything, am I going to help the new development? So these are like the 4 proposed designs like in different areas. So these 4 designs will unify like the new the transit-oriented development that's already like there, the train system which is already there, and then creating a transit-oriented development in this 4 sites will help Addis Ababa to become more like livable and also accessible. So it will connect everything. So the proposed design is, the goal is to improve the quality of life of the residents by creating more walkable living environment where the residents can walk to work or take the transit from places to places, and instead of like using cars or waiting for like public transport, which will take longer time. And as you see it on the figure, this is a graphic summary of how transit-oriented development can address these objectives while at the same time meet the higher goal of improving the city's overall sustainability. So, Fabio.
Okay, thank you. Corinne, do you have, oh good, you're coming back up, great.
Yes. Thank you. Oh my goodness, those were really excellent presentations. Thank you to all 4 of our panelists for such great work, like really exceptional research that they've done within their planning programs, and then how that's translated into kind of the passions that they have in their early careers. And so what we wanted to do now is we have our 5th panelist. We have Raya Smiley here. She works for the Metropolitan Council. And really what we want to hear from Raya is kind of to share her story as well in how she began her career, her interests, where that has taken her. With our poll, we had about 20% that were 0 to 5 years of experience. 77% of the folks on our call are 5+ years. That's where Raya falls into, and then 3% were students. And so it's really great to hear from professionals, especially women in planning, who are at different stages in their career and kind of the evolution of that and where they are going and what they found was important to focus on in that early career. And then once you get to that 5-year mark, even talking about mentorship as well is something we highly advocate for the Women in Planning Division to support one another, to show that we have a network of really awesome women all across the country and internationally. And we'll talk a little bit about more of that later, of the actual division kind of methods. But we're going to have Raya talk to you a little bit about kind of her story and a lot of the really interesting things that she's done in her career. So here's Raya.
Thank you, Corinne, and thank you for everyone who is attending this webinar today, and to the Ohio chapter and as well as Women in Planning division for organizing this. As Corinne mentioned, I'm a senior planner at the Metropolitan Council. I don't know if you remember that bio in the beginning, but what I do mainly actually relates to long-range planning and comprehensive planning, especially right now in Minnesota, the Twin Cities region. It's the season of comp plans, and that happens only every 10 years, that the cities in the metro area have to, cities, townships, all of them, have to update their long-range comprehensive plans every 10 years. So we are busy with that. But I'm going to go back to how I got into planning. I grew up in Iran, the city of Tehran. So that's where I went for my bachelor's degree, University of Tehran. And I studied urban planning. I just put urban planning here because it was something actually in between urban planning and urban design. And it's difficult to translate. I don't actually know what the real translation would be to do it justice. But my intention when I was in high school was not to go into planning. To be honest, I didn't even know that planning exists. And I always wanted to go into engineering and become a mechanical engineer. That is what my dad was, but so it had some influence on me. But I kind of happened upon, I kind of happened to find urban planning. I just ended up there, and that's because the education system is just different over there. You have to take a test, and there's like a matching process and all of that. So you kind of end up in places that maybe you didn't plan for it necessarily. It's still your choice to some extent, but it could be very different than what you imagined your future could potentially look like. So I started studying planning, and it was very weird. I was very uncomfortable at first to realize that there's no chemistry, there's no real math in it, there's like none of the sciences that I expected were present in this field. So it took me a while to get a good grasp on what it is that we're doing there. And even though like about after a few months, I had a chance to switch my major from urban planning to mechanical engineering, I specifically told my dad that I like this. I like that I'm working with people. I like that what I do will be more than just sitting behind a computer or a desk and planning things that are, like doing the mechanical engineering work that is important, but I wanted to be involved in something that has an effect on people's lives, including myself. So I wanted to be able to walk in an area and think about how it was designed with intention, and it was designed by people who thought about every actions or reactions of the users of that space. It was just very interesting. So I stayed there and got my bachelor's degree in urban planning. That organizing plan for Boyzhnor Inner City it was my thesis. That's a city in northeastern part of Iran. That's where my dad is from. So it's a very old, historic downtown, not downtown, like a business district of sorts that it was like a plan for revitalization and partially urban design actually included in that. I then moved from there in 2009 to Minnesota, University of Minnesota, Humphrey School of Public Affairs to be exact. And I started my Master of Urban and Regional Planning. The Mississippi National River and Recreation Area Sustainability Framework was something that I worked on with some of my classmates for our capstone project at the end. And that's when I thought that I want to be focusing on environmental planning, not really knowing that concentration, I mean, at that point in my career, which was kind of zero, didn't quite matter as much. And I needed to broaden my understanding of all concepts of planning, and so many pieces of it are so connected to each other that you have to know about all of them. If you want, you can pursue it further, maybe a little bit later. But I realized that after a little while that I couldn't be a good environmental planner without having an environmental studies or sciences kind of background. Unfortunately, in 2011, when I graduated, it was right after the market crash. No one was hiring. People who should have retired weren't retiring. And it was just a very terrible market for finding jobs or internships. It was just nothing available. So there was a time that I spent without anything. I was just basically home. And then I kind of tapped into after getting over that depression of not finding a job and just being home the whole time. It was terrible. But I got over that and started talking with my own network, which were my classmates from school, my graduate program, and kind of sharing with them, even though it was difficult and it made me feel vulnerable, but sharing with them that I was looking for something, that I was having problems in finding opportunities. And two of them, in fact, connected me with three of them, connected me with their own connections. And that's how I ended up in the West Broadway Business and Area Coalition and Sierra Club North Star Chapter. Both of those were internships that sort of were created for me, I can say, I suppose. They weren't looking for interns, but they had a lot of projects. They also couldn't hire anyone. So it was me approaching them through my network and asking them, do you have something for me to do? Please, I'll do it for free. Because I was desperately looking for experience. I couldn't have I was looking for a job for 1 year and I didn't do anything kind of a situation going on. And so I started working in these two nonprofits almost at the same time, and also as a sales associate in a store, because you have to pay the bills somehow. And then I even had to move in with my aunt because I couldn't find a place to live. It was not great. But then after I felt confident about my skills, I got out of that sales associate position, and I thought that I'm going to focus mainly on finding an actual position. One of my internships turned into a part-time position because they had a farmer's market, so it was great, but it was seasonal. And then at the same time, in another nonprofit, which had a lot of connections with that other nonprofit that I worked in, and a part-time position became available. So I started at that one as well. So 2 part-time position at the same time. Then the farmer's market ended, and then I just basically collected and gathered all the courage I ever had and told my supervisor in my Minneapolis Riverfront Partnership position that I'm sorry, I need a full-time position. If you can turn this into a full-time, that would be great. If you can't, I unfortunately have to spend my time in finding a full-time position. And fortunately, they did turn it into a full-time position. A few months later, the Metropolitan Council position became available. It was not a senior planner position. It was a planning technician. And I worked with my manager in kind of developing that position because it was sort of new. She had changed it. And it ended up like adding a lot of responsibilities. At that point, I didn't say no to many, many things. And I was like, oh, I have time, I'll learn it. And I did. And there were just a lot of responsibilities. And after a year, I talked with her and I was like, I don't think I'm a planning technician anymore because I think I'm doing the work of a planner. And she agreed. So we worked on that and my position got kind of reclassified and I became a planner. And after a couple of years of doing that, and I was like, how can I become a senior planner? And how can I move further? Because you want to have a path. You want to know that you're moving forward. However, you are seeing your future. In planning and anything else, you just need to have a path. It doesn't have to be clear, but knowing that you're at a dead end position is the worst feeling that you can possibly have. So I talked with her, and she encouraged me to expand my knowledge and experience by volunteering on boards and commissions. That's how I got into one of the commissions, the first one, neighborhood and community engagement. And it was very interesting. To this day, it's very interesting, very challenging, and sometimes I'm like, why am I doing this? But it's such a great experience, and now I know how to be on a board, how Robert's Rules of Order work, things that you wouldn't otherwise learn. And that kind of created more networking opportunities, more connections, and to the point that my city council member called me one day and asked if I wanted to be a member on this other committee. And of course I said yes, because why wouldn't I? It's just, I guess what I'm trying to say is that how opportunities, networking, connections from one point to another can actually take you a very, very, very long way. If you told me about 6 years ago that 6 years from now, this is where you're going to be, I wouldn't have believed it. And I would have said that, no, maybe you're talking about 15 years from now. But like, I think a lot of things are possible. I know it sounds like it's something cliche to say, but these opportunities do turn into another. And because of all this experience, because of this path, I basically went back to Humphrey. I volunteered to become a mentor in the mentor program because I wanted to share that with people who may have similar experiences to me, that either having trouble finding a position, don't get disappointed, you'll find something. And when you find the first one, the next one is going to be easier, sorry. Not easy, easier. But also that I wanted to tell them, especially the ones who have different backgrounds, whether it be in a different field or, for example, if you're from a different country, if your language, the first language is not English, mine isn't. So I apologize for all the stumbling that I'm doing, but there's always a path. There's always work that you can do, but be prepared to make yourself vulnerable and connect with your network and kind of be genuine with your network and talking about your experiences, your expertise, your skills, and use every opportunity to strengthen all of those and in terms of like making yourself better, like professionally and personally growing and developing your potentials, basically. So that's all I have. I'm going to turn it back to Corinne. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer as well.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Raya. I think it's really important that we, talk about those opportunities that we have to connect to, the new generation of planners with our season planners, with our mid and season planners, and opening those opportunities to connect with our colleagues, building our skills, as Raya mentioned, volunteering, and then mentorship. So really, you could be a mentor at any stage in your career. And so I think that's also extremely valuable for us as planners, and then women in planning in general. And so I think we're ready for our questions now. So I just want to say a little bit about the division. So we're up to about 1,300 members for the Women in Planning division. When I joined, we had about 100 members. And so this is like exceptional. We've grown exponentially in the past 3.5 years. And so if you too would like to be part of our division, you could just go to my APA and just add it. It's only $25 a year. And so just to join along with us and all the things that we offer to our division. And you can always connect with us at our national conference. And we're even trying to do chapter events for each state chapter through APA as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Christine, who can lead the charge on the questions. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Okay. And if you have any questions, again, like I said, just type them in and make sure you list who you want to answer the question. We have about 10 to 15 minutes, so we probably won't get to all of them. So you can just email folks directly. So first question is for Andrea. Does the stormwater guide include a monitor like Google Analytics, for example, to track the number of visits to the guide? The number of visits would be beneficial to the local stormwater management agency.
No, I have not used Google Analytics. I've posted it in the Facebook page a couple times and received a lot of good feedback for people who thought it was informational, even more suggestions to add, but I haven't tracked the views of the web page.
Okay, thanks. Genevieve, have Airbnb rentals skewed your findings in any way? In New York City, that is an issue right now and is a factor in driving up long-term rental prices and also the availability of long-term rental units.
Can you hear me? I'm not sure
Yes.
if I'm unmuted.
Yes, we can hear
okay,
you.
Good. Well, I'm not sure what it mean by skewed, but Airbnb is present in Ketchum, but I chose to look at vacationrentalbyowner.com because it's actually a lot more rentals are on that site. I think it's just kind of a cultural thing. Like, I don't know, it just seems like more are in that actually region of the United States. People use the vacation rental by owner more than Airbnb. So, they are present, and it's really tricky unless you have really good, there's software programs that can do this for you, but basically it's impossible to track these things manually over time because a lot are cross-listed on different sites. And the only way to figure it out manually is basically to look at the pictures. And that's a huge amount of time. And as I mentioned, it's changing all the time, depending on the season, depending on whether there are events coming up. Some properties will be listed one week and then they won't be listed the next week. And so, Airbnb is definitely present in Ketchum, but, VRBO is bigger there. But I guess in terms of skewing findings, I think my research, I can't prove 100% that, one thing is responsible for increasing housing prices. That just wasn't the methodology that I would use or really was able to use. It would require a lot more resources than I had available. But I do think that really what I hope that this research would produce was really just kind of understanding of the trends going on and, kind of looking at what's going on and maybe saying, hey, there might be a relationship here, but I can't actually prove that with the methodology that I use. But there are definitely studies that have shown, mostly in big cities, that the larger number of short-term rentals seem like they correlate with higher housing prices and lower availability. So definitely a challenge for housing across the United States.
Okay, thank you. And while we still have you, did any of the housing data look at housing demand by age, including specifically elderly housing?
Yeah, so I didn't have evidence of housing demand. That's kind of where that housing needs assessment that I mentioned would be really handy. I think the last one was a long time ago, maybe like early 2010s. That's definitely something that I think needs to be done. I think that the local housing authority is actually going to be doing that study. That's what they told me anyway. So hopefully they'll be able to kind of complete that picture. But I know that, I think Ketchum has the age range skews upward, and that's partly because of vacation home and second homeowners, but there definitely are permanent residents. And either way, anyone who's there, no matter what their age is, needs housing. So so I didn't look at that, but I'm hopeful that some other studies will provide complementary data that will fit in nicely with what I found.
Okay, thank you. Next question for Carrie. Eye tracking glasses. Never heard of them. How do you get them? Do you buy them, rent them? Talk more about this.
Sure. We had for this study a partnership with the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. They have a Center for Injury Research and Prevention, primarily focused on studying teenage drivers and elderly drivers. And they have a driving simulator. So that's really the foundation of eye tracking research is, simulating experience with screens and a replica of a car. And then you put on the glasses and you respond to these simulated environments. As an aside, it's also been really heavily used in, secret shopper things of where do people look in a grocery store, or is this advertising working, and website design. But anyway, that's a tangent. So we were able to borrow the eye tracking glasses from CHOP and this institute, which was what was neat about this research, that it was taking them out of the laboratory and putting them on people in this real world environment, bringing them to the streets. So our first project was using them, borrowing them, and then eventually we were able to secure grant funding to purchase our own pair of eye tracking glasses. The manufacturer is Tobii, Tobii. Easy to remember, it ends with 2 eyes. And they sell a series of glasses, software, and different things you can add on, with biometric sensors or galvanic skin response, which we're considering depending on, what we pursue next. But yeah, the manufacturer is Tobii. It's a huge investment. So, if there's a way to partner with an institution that has them, definitely, get your feet wet in the research first. But yeah, I hope that answers your question, and I'm glad to have introduced you to something new.
Thank you. Before we go on, I've gotten a few people saying that they're trying to enter this in, find it for CM, and they can't. So I tried to, and it is nothing is popping up. And I just randomly tried searching something else, and something else isn't coming up. I think there might be something going on with the CM page. So I've emailed my super secret contact at APA, and hopefully either she'll get back to me before we get off the phone, or give it a day, maybe try submitting your CMs on Monday. We will figure out why you can't find it. So it's not just you, but we'll get it fixed, whatever the problem is. I'll see what I can do. So next question. I am rather new to planning and new to APA. Is there a program to sign up to be or get a mentor? Because I would love a mentor.
This is Genevieve. I can answer that question. Well, so I have a mentor through the AICP student pilot program. Is that what AICP candidate pilot program? So
yeah, that's what it is.
I signed up at the last with the APA National Conference in New Orleans. I signed up before that, and I was able to meet my mentor then. And he's this very well-respected senior kind of sustainability water planner guy. But he actually lives in Arizona, so I think they try to match you with people who live close to you and are in your interest. So that's been really great for me so far. I've been participating in that for about 3 or 4 months now. So if you want to sign up for the AICP candidate program, you can definitely get a mentor through that.
Yes, I'd also like to add, through the Women in Planning Division, if you contact me, we have a list of our 1,300 members that we could connect you with a mentor. And also, if you want a mentor during the national conference, they also offer that opportunity. You can sign up for that and get paired with someone in your interest area. So that's also, it could be short term, just for that conference, just for that conversation, or could extend beyond that as well.
Thank you. Okay, next question is for Yemasarich. What are the forms of public transit you are looking to connect? Is there a preferred type of public transit used to suggest to people to replace cars?
Okay, so right now there is only like the bus system is also like poor, and there is like the current system, as I told you, is new for Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. So I was thinking, like, because the current system is already there and it's accessible, but the residents right now, they're not getting used to that system, because they have to travel like all the way like from suburbs to downtown. So but right now, like getting another like route by making it like to function instead of like every hour or every 30 minutes, like especially for the rush hours times or in the peak hours, like to function regularly, like within a couple of like minutes, maybe within the 10-15 minutes frame every on the peak hours, and they make it more like accessible, and so people can replace the car with the transit option, because once it becomes like accessible, and then if it is like regulating like hourly, and then if they have like a specific hours which will arrive there, and then a specific hours which will leave, depart from that area, people will start like using the train system, the train rail system more than like the cars, because the traffic congestion and everything is going to take you more time than the train system, you know. So
Thank you. And guess what? You can log your CM credits now. It is up and ready. It just needed to be refreshed, so you should be able to find it now. Let's see. I think we can do one more question. This one is for Carrie. In New York City, there is an issue at this time with funding traffic cameras for detecting speeding vehicles in the proximity of schools. The claim is the deaths of pedestrians and bicyclists decreased dramatically with the use of the cameras. Did you include any traffic cameras to collect data in conjunction with the glasses for observation? And do you consider the traffic cameras valuable for the safety of those walking or on bicycles?
Personally, I wish we could have used more videotape of the intersection to get more, an understanding of how it's used all types of times of day and different days of week and such. We did not incorporate that into this study. We did only, conduct observational time frames during peak and off-peak hours and kind of watching and counting traffic. I have heard a lot, especially around Vision Zero with the red light cameras and the speed cameras and enforcement, and think that it helps understand how people are using streets and to, better design things so that people do go slower if you're having a lot of issues with that. I guess I want to make sure I'm on track with this question, but yeah, I think the more data you can gather, it's always better, because I think that's the issue with a lot of street design in general, is that it's planned for vehicular efficiency and moving cars faster. And so now we've kind of got to react to that and design things in a way that it's safe for our most vulnerable users, which in a lot of cases are children, and they are central when there's a school nearby. So I don't know how we could incorporate that or have access to the city's red light cameras for research, but I definitely, if that was available, would love to integrate it and to kind of use that to complement this visual experience to, understand how people are using space and how we could improve it.
Okay, thank you. Guess what? It's 2:30. Time flies, right? So I'm going to go ahead and close up shop for today. So Corinne, Andrea, Carrie, Genevieve, Yema Sarich, our last speaker, who I didn't write down your name because you showed up at the last moment, so I don't have your info. Just thank you for joining us today. Your division always puts on such a great webcast, and you always have just a great array of folks joining. So thank you. And you can have a copy of this presentation on our webcast webpage. I'm going to post it up as soon as we get off the line here. And that's at ohioplanning.org/planning webcast. And we'll also have a recording of this session available on our YouTube channel. Again, I'll load it up as soon as we get off the line. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube, and you should be able to get those CM credits now. Under the CM search, either the title of today's session or the ID number, and it should pop up for you. So everyone, again, thank you. Thank you to the Women in Planning Division. And everyone, hey, have a great weekend, and we will talk next time.